his skin is drying out and turning leathery, and the next time we see him, he's hanging in Harold's place. So at first glance, Tommy's fate appears to be quite a bit different than Thomas's, but there's actually some overlap. You just have to use your imagination. Think about it. We already established that Harold was likely going to make something out of Thomas's skin, and what could be more poetic than him making Thomas into the next scarecrow, forcing him into the same position to be abused just like he was. I could be wrong, but I feel like that was the implied fate of Thomas, while the movie leaves no doubt that Harold has found his replacement. But remember what I said in the intro, that the stories that Alvin Schwartz used in his series all came from folklore, myth, and legend. Take the Wendigo story, which is also referenced in the film. Schwartz based that one on the famous Algernon Blackwood tale, which we actually covered last year. Well, Harold is no different, so let's take a look at the twisted tales that inspired his creation. So it turns out that Harold is not the first evil scarecrow to
I
come
love
to life.
all the propellers on this album.
It's actually rather popular in the mountainous countries surrounding the Alps. Austria, Switzerland, and Germany, to name a few. I decided to read some of those tales and found some interesting things I want to share. First off, Harold isn't just some doll or scarecrow come to life. He's a creature that in folklore is known as a Senentunchi, a Swiss word that I am definitely mispronouncing. In folklore, Senentunchis are deformed and distorted dolls that are made from pieces of trash, like how Harold was created from straw and old rags they had lying around. Most Senentucci tales follow the same structure as the one that we just read. Some lonely farmers in the mountains make a doll and abuse it, then the doll comes to life and takes its revenge. But there is one distinct and much darker difference between the tales that were told around the mountains and the story we just read. Yeah, believe it or not, the story can get darker. In the folk tales that Schwartz borrowed from, the Senentucci is usually made to look like a woman. There's actually a Swiss horror movie made in 2010 that follows this version pretty closely. And it's for that reason that I'm never going to watch it. Because in addition to beating the Senentucci on a regular basis, the farmers also her, which makes you feel significantly less terrible for the one that gets skinned alive at the end. Some other differences are that the farmers in the tale are often described
look, it says
as
seat
godless
by all capital letters, bad thing. But all caps, I'm gonna yell seat.
Life is them baptizing it. Why do they baptize the doll? For the sole purpose of dunking on Jesus. It was their way of saying, you know that sacred ceremony that all of your followers have to go through? Well, we're going to do the same ceremony with the sex doll that we made out of trash. It's at this point that God evidently runs out of patience. When the doll is baptized, he blesses it with life. Then it punishes its oppressors for their sinful ways by brutally murdering the worst one of the bunch. We're never given the exact details for how exactly that murder goes down, but it always ends the same way, with the surviving farmers looking back at the hut, seeing the killer drying out their friend's skin on the roof. Now, in the process of making this episode, I wanted to read up on that the author Alvin Schwartz used. And in his bibliography, he lists a book called Once Upon a Time on the Nature of Fairy Tales, written by Swiss scholar Max Luthi in 1970. If you consider yourself a folklore nerd like I do, you would love this book. Luthi provides all kinds of rich analysis on the tales from the sociological to psychological to structural and stylistic. Chapter 6 is where you'll find an examination of stories about living dolls and learn the difference between local legends and fairy tales. Stories about Senentucci are specifically classified as local legends because most of the time when they're retold, they're presented as if they really happened. Local legends also tend to be darker and more violent than fairy tales, or at least fairy tales as we know them today. That being said, living dolls are still known as fairy tales, and this manages to teach the same typical Senentucci story, even containing a lot of similar details, but is much less likely to traumatize you. I'll keep this brief. Basically, a princess who's in need of some companionship makes herself a man out of sugar, almonds, and groats, things that she had lying around, just like the farmers. Then she prays to God for 40 days and 40 nights, and God blesses the groat man with life as a reward. So the inverse of the farmers who were punished when God gave life to the doll. The princess immediately falls in love with Mr. Groats, who becomes the talk of the kingdom due to his miraculous creation, but much to her dismay, an evil queen learns of his existence and wants him for herself. So she kidnaps him. The princess is then forced to search for Mr. Groats throughout the land, wearing out
would you kidnap?
pairs of iron shoes in the process. And eventually she finds him sitting on the throne next to the evil queen. At first, he doesn't recognize the princess at all, but eventually she refreshes his memory, and the two ride a majestic horseback. Meanwhile, she turns to make him himself. Because she's selfish, sinful, and doesn't put any love into it, the man just rots and has to be thrown and subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode on another iconic tale from the series. Until then, my name is John Solo, and remember, John shot first. Subject matter and transform it into something
Listen to me, please! Please stay where you are!
Lady not only got the most votes, but absolutely dominated her competition. Out of more than 30,000 voters, half of them said that she was the most terrifying. And listen, I'm not saying she isn't scary. I mean, look at her. She'd be the only woman on Tinder with 0 matches. The reason I was so surprised was because when you actually read the story she's featured in, she's not nearly as bad as these other monstrosities. Least of all, heroin. You can learn all about by watching Lamb to her appearance. With that in mind, I want to spend today refreshing your memories on who exactly the Pale Lady is by reviewing the tale that Alvin Schwartz wrote about her, comparing it to her appearance in the recent film adaptation of the series, and looking at the mysterious true story that he used as inspiration. First, though, I want to thank our sponsor who made this week's episode possible.
Careful. Fires in here, I'm sure of it. Check.
Awesome, right to your front door every month. What makes the box
That was
so
cool how it
awesome?
gleamed. I like how
Top-shelf goods from under-the-radar brands that specialize in barware, home and kitchen goods,
obviously
and more. The kicker is that 90% of the products come from small businesses, many of which are based right here in the U.S. The way it works is you take a preference quiz when you sign up so they can see your interests. Then they'll choose a box of awesome to send you containing around $70 worth of goods.
Careful.
You have to pay a fraction of that.
Just out of the way.
If you like the box, that is. But if the one they assign isn't your thing, then you could choose to swap it or skip the month entirely and pay the cost. You only pay for what you want, and it's always a good deal. One of my favorite products they've sent me is their Over Easy box. It contained a cast iron skillet, Bloody Mary mix, pancake mix, and for my favorite